What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some Pillars of Eternity and soon-to-be Avowed lore, and today we are talking about Rymrgand, the Beast of Winter, but also the god of death, famine, plague, bad luck, erosion, entropy, and basically anything to do with anything along that kind of line. Gonna be some spoilers for both the games, for sure. The first game less so, the second game very much so. Just keep that in mind as we are moving through this. But nonetheless, Rymrgand. So, like Barath, he is considered a god of death. However, unlike Barath, who is the god of the cycle of life and death and turning the wheel in this world, Rymrgand is described as the executioner's axe. He is the god of death in very much so the way of literally just the act of someone dying. Moreover, with the other things that he's the god of, that death is, for him, permanent. That's the important part. Because Rymrgand is often attributed with wanting to bring the entire world to complete stillness, or oblivion. Basically, where everything is dead and nothing is happening. That is his goal. Now, that goal inherently puts him at great odds with all of the other gods, as you might imagine. So, as is pretty common knowledge, the Ingwithans, of course, made the gods. However, Rymrgand obviously has a very different goal than the rest of them. The rest of them, very much so, have a vested interest in keeping the wheel turning and living off of it. Rymrgand, however, wants that to end. He knows it eventually will, which, largely, in a way, is wishing for his own death, because everything includes him, because if there is no life, then as we learn throughout the games, the gods themselves will eventually starve and die, which includes Rymrgand. But nonetheless, that is what he is the god of. Now, because of that, he has very little interest in the concerns of literally everything going on throughout the games. In fact, we only really interact with him much at all in Beast of Winter, which is a Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire DLC, and that is simply because his realm was breached, and he wants that to stop. But that said, before we get into it, you might think that because of his very nature that no one would necessarily worship Rymrgand, and that's actually not true. He is worshipped primarily by the Pale Elves. Now, the Pale Elves are fairly isolationist compared to the rest of Eora. They are rare outside of a place called the White That Wins, which is where they're from. In fact, it is often described that most people actually will never see one at all, because they very rarely leave there. Their entire culture there is described as worshipping the god of entropy. And one of the chief things about that is resurrection in their culture is actually considered a punishment, because in worshipping the god of entropy, when they die, they want it to be their final death. They don't want to be reincarnated. Now, in the first game, he doesn't really come up at all. He is one of the gods that, of course, wants you to just consign the souls of the Deerwood to oblivion, and that's pretty much where he's at with it. In the second game, we see him a few times, and then we see him a bunch in the Beast of Winter, but he will show up before that to offer the occasional dialogue here and there. You can actually talk with him directly a couple of times. In fact, if you're rude to him in some of these conversations, he'll just straight up kill you. Because again, unlike all the other gods, Rymrgand doesn't really care what Eothas is doing. In fact, if Rymrgand knew what Eothas was planning, it's likely that Rymrgand would have actually tried to help in some way, because Eothas breaking the wheel in the second game plays into what Rymrgand is the god of. Because in breaking the wheel, Eothas has effectively stopped the cycle of reincarnation, and if that isn't fixed, then literally all life will eventually end, which is in fact the oblivion that Rymrgand wants. Which, by the way, as a quick aside, is why if they ever pick up the plot from there, it's believed Avowed as a prequel, so I don't know if it's going to happen. But if they ever do pick up the plot from the second Pillars of Eternity, I find it incredibly likely that Rymrgand will probably be the antagonist of it, simply for that reason alone, that breaking the wheel basically played into what he is the god of, and it being repaired would obviously be a problem for him. But let's talk about the Beast of Winter a little bit. Not the DLC, for the most part, it doesn't have that much to do with him, but specifically what happens at the end of it. Now, essentially, once you kind of take care of the problem, which is a dragon that has kind of rooted itself in the Beast of Winter's lair, we will eventually come across none other than the Beast of Winter itself. Now, technically, the Beast of Winter is just an avatar of Rymrgand. Like a lot of gods, it's the form it chooses to take, which is to say this very tall auroch, I believe it's called, but basically kind of like a minotaur. It's described as being 30 foot tall in some cases, with ice and things clinging to its fur that people believe is actually the souls of the dead. And moreover, that basically anything this thing touches just dies. Now, with the ending of this DLC, this can go one of two ways with your meeting with the Beast of Winter. You can agree to become its agent, in which case Rymrgand will put his own chime into you, in addition to Barath's, which is what made you the herald for the game there. Or you can choose to fight it. Technically, you can fight the Beast of Winter, proving that you're worthy to leave or whatever. However, I find it incredibly unlikely that this is actually the canon ending to this DLC, simply because the Beast of Winter is the avatar of a god. You're fighting it in its own plane, and supposedly you're able to win that fight in a place where previously in the game, Rymrgand could literally just wipe you from existence with a thought, so I just don't buy it. The other ending is far more likely in my opinion, though admittedly that is just speculation, in that you can agree to become his agent. Now the problem with this is that when you die, your soul will be consigned to the White Void, which is Rymrgand's realm, which means you will not be reincarnated and your soul will be permanently destroyed. Now, my opinion is that that is more than likely their way of ending the saga of the Watcher from the first two Pillars games, and then carrying on the story with new protagonists or just kind of the generic RP character, that kind of thing. But nonetheless, that is kind of how it ends with all the options. So there you go, my personal favorite god in the Pillars of Eternity universe, kind of everything we know about him, his goals, what he's all about. So if you enjoyed the video, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.